localization, or I call it culturalizations, is not just about changing the languages, but there are a lot more into that to be more relevant to the local markets. So that is a starting point, to recognize that and to be willing to open up and kind of be more curious, to investigate a bit more, rather than make assumptions. You can just copy and paste one country's strategy to another country. To actually, first of all, to open up people's mind about their world out there, that you should be open up, so that hopefully that will not only influence them in their professional life or their business, but also their personal life as well, to be more inclusive about other people and so on.
Hi, I'm Mike Green, and welcome to Understanding Users, the podcast where I chat candidly with UX design and research professionals from around the world to hear about how they build digital products and services in a user-centered way.
I'm Chui Chui Tan. I'm Malaysian-born Chinese, and I have been living and working in the UK for over 20 years now, 20 and a half years to be precise. For the last 16 years, I have been helping businesses such as Spotify, the Washington Post, Fiverr, Marriott International, in helping them to simplifying complex cultural landscape, or simplifying cultural nuances into actionable strategies that they can use to drive their global markets more successfully.
Brilliant, thank you, and it's great to be chatting with you, Chui Chui. We worked together a long time ago now, briefly, and I'm fascinated with your kind of the interest in your career in terms of international research and cross-cultural research. How did you get into that? Tell me more about that.
So I actually, my background is user experience. That's what we have been working together for a long time. And then while I was working for agencies, this is like 15 to 16 years ago, Marriott International was actually one of the clients that very few American companies will actually recognize that the need of understanding users in different markets, or their customers in different markets, rather than just the US and the UK and others. So I became their global consultant, if you like, external consultant, to help them to understand how people in different countries go about booking hotels, and when they get into the hotels, what are the things important to them, and so on. So yeah, from there, I start to kind of look after all the international projects. And also when I speak in conferences, I talk about the cultural differences and why it's important. And I think that was 10 years ago, I wrote an ebook about international user research. And so yeah, when I start working for myself, I focus very much just on that. But my focus became even more on the strategic side, not just looking into what people want, what people say they want, or how they behave, but also looking into the underlying cultural norms, and also cultural underlying and unconscious values of different countries, and also their ecosystem as a whole, how the countries functions as a whole, their political issues, their economy issues, their technology setup, and so on, and how that influence people behavior. So with that, I help businesses to kind of touch on every single part of their business, to say, okay, how do you guys can work together to be more relevant to a local market?
Interesting. So if we kind of bring it back to UX for a minute, so in terms of kind of UX professionals wanting to conduct research in unfamiliar contexts, let's say wanting to sort of build products and services, what would you say are the most important aspects of cultural sensitivity and just awareness of doing business overseas and working overseas that professionals need to think about?
I think ultimately the first one is to recognize that actually you don't know it all, and also to not making assumptions that are stereotyping. So to say, everyone say that is how they functions, how they work. So we just make decisions based on that, and then also to recognize that localization, or I call it culturalizations, is not just about changing the languages, but there are a lot more into that to be more relevant to the local markets. So that is a starting point, to recognize that and to be willing to open up and kind of be more curious to investigate a bit more, rather than make assumptions that you can just copy and paste one country's strategy to another country.
And I know, like in the book, you talk about the difference between culturalization and localization. I'm interested in that difference. Just talk us through that a little bit and how we can unpick that.
Yeah. So the book that you are referring is actually my recent book called Research for Global Growth, which is different from the one I mentioned earlier, the ebook. So yeah, in the book, I did mention and highlight that I normally avoid using the terms localizations. So localization is a term that everyone knows what that is, like to adapt your products or service into a new market. But as I talk to a lot of companies, stakeholders, and individuals, localization seems to be very easily misinterpreted as language translation. So you translate means you localize, or you change the currency means you already localize. So it's very much one-off effort where you do one thing and then that is it. You change it and you're done. So in order to be successful and more relevant to a market, you actually need more than that. Hence, I start to use the terms culturalizations. It's not a term that you can find from Oxford or any dictionaries, but it's very self-explanatory. Like people would know what they means. So it's a deeper level of adaptations to local markets, and it normally is an ongoing effort to continue understanding the culture, the behaviors, and so on, because there's so much to learn about a market and the customer, everything, for you to make a lot more decisions. You can start from somewhere, but culturalizations means that you always can find out more and then continue to evolve a lot more. So yeah, I tend to use the culturalizations terms to avoid misunderstandings. Say, oh, we did very well localizations, and all they did is just changing the language.
That's fascinating. So in terms of, I'm interested to know kind of how this is done at the moment. So for example, if we're thinking about, let's say, mobile apps, so Google Maps in Indonesia versus Google Maps in Nigeria, or whether it be Uber or whether it be Spotify or something like that, to what extent have those large global organizations done kind of cultural adaptation depending on the market, or is it still a one size fits all kind of solution?
No, I have to say that a lot of companies actually realize, especially the big giant companies, actually realize the need of understanding different markets and the needs and so on. I can talk about Spotify a bit more because I have been working with them for more than 40 markets before pre-launch, or actually growing in different markets. So yeah, Spotify is one of the company that actually very much on understanding the different culture, people behavior, not just to grow and to be better in that market, but also to see what they can do as a business to be more innovative and provide more features or things that they can fit into not just one market, but actually consistently to different markets as well. And I know companies like Uber or Airbnb, and they do a lot of those. IKEA as well. IKEA is very good in ethnography and doing research in understanding like a market, how to actually put up their decorations or interior design based on even the height of the local people. So for example, I know they actually did a lot of research before they launched into India. The height, so the display and everything is actually similar height than you would have in the West, and for example, and also how people actually how the products, also how they're going to create the products that actually much more into the local house setup, and how people live in a lot of family, 3 generations live together, the the types of products they need will be slightly different from different markets. So yeah, I have to say a lot of companies start to look into it, which is a really good news. To As compared to, like I say, 15 years ago, everyone thinks it's like, oh, we did it all, or we just go to the language that countries that we know the language, or closer to like Spain and France and Germany that we are actually close by. So it's funny though, like if I see the trend this what we just discussed, just remind me, if I see the trends of requests of work that I help clients work on 10 15 years ago, it was more like the big four of European countries like Spain, France, Germany, and Italy, and then China. Like everyone wants to go to China and everything. But for the last 6 7 years, like things have changed significantly. A lot of work I have done in Middle East, Latin America. Latin America is always one that is very interesting. And Asia, not China anymore, that as a key market, but actually Japan, Indonesia. Indonesia is a big one because it's big populations and so on. So yeah, the opportunity, I guess, to capture the market share is actually slightly different now.
So what are the risks and pitfalls, would you say, for brands, or let's say digital service providers, that don't take cultural adaptations into account, and don't purely, let's just say, change the language, as you say, rather than doing a more deeper redesign, taking cultural differences into account?
It's a bit like if we cannot take away the culturalizations and elements, right? If you say the standard user research, you can say a company actually don't do research, they just do whatever they want and kind of put it out there. And we all know, being in the UX industry, that doesn't work. You need to understand your users and so on. So the international and culturalizations elements is actually another layer on top. You not only need to know about your users, but you need to know them even more so, because they're in a different environment, different ecosystem and so on. So without knowing them, it's hard for you to make informed decisions that is actually valid to that market. So yeah, I don't know, like for me, it feels like really obvious, but of course, like it's quite hard for people to see it through, especially when it feels a bit more overwhelming and complex. But it doesn't have to be, though. I think that is, the other day I was talking to someone, a product person, and she was saying like it feels really overwhelming because she was just looking after one product and already feel like, oh, what should I do, and so on. But it's always, you can start from small, like culturalizations. It doesn't have to be like, oh, huge, you need to know it all. It's always a progressive learning about a market, and you can do it as a small level and then make a small decisions based on that, kind of make it a step by step based on the size of the team or the timeline you have or the budget you have and so on. So it could go big if you have more budget and more time and help, and you can gather more insights about your product, about the market, and then help you to define more strategy, roadmap, short term or long term. Or you can go smaller first and then understand slightly a smaller amount of insight, and then help you to make shorter and quicker decisions. And that is fine as well. It's just to find the fine line between the two.
So, in your view, then, is it possible for someone from a different culture to do research in a particular culture, or should it always be? So, let's say your example about Indonesia. Should it be someone who's familiar with Indonesia, or is Indonesian, or has kind of competence in the language, that's doing the research, or could a European or an American go over and still achieve the same outcomes?
Yeah. Good questions. So I obviously am not nations of any all countries, but have covered and helped companies or clients for over 55 countries. So obviously, it's possible to be done, but they all have pros and cons. Whether you have local person to do it or you actually have a different setup. So I give an example. So there are a few ways to do it. So you can have a local go straight. If let's say you are a client and you are a stakeholder, you wanted to go into a country, for example, South Korea, you can get the local teams, local UX researcher to kind of do that for you. What from my experience, sometimes it's actually there is a risk of them being too familiar with their culture and what they do, and what they kind of experience in a daily basis, that they actually don't pick that out as something very important. So as an outsider, you might go and say, that is so interesting because it's so different and unique, and then that could be the things that you could use to leverage what you can do in that market. So there's always um, there's something. That's why I actually client come to me, and then I will work with my local team to do that, because then they will have the global view for me, and also for the local view that we can bring it in as well. And also it's depending on the individual's experiences. Or as you do you have to you as you do more and have more experience in doing that, like myself, then it's easier for you to pick up what to look into and what to listen, what to kind of probe into more, what area to actually focus a bit more in this country because it's so unique, but actually you don't need to focus on that or dig deeper in the other countries, or because the products that you're looking into is more important in this market to look into maybe the housing setup. But then on other clients, is household setup is not important. So it's kind of like, from experience, you can learn from that to know what to pull in and what to analyze, how to analyze the information as well. Sure. So if you think about this, so this is adaptations of I think Ishin organization culture model that he used to kind of talk about the cultural elements of an organization. So think about it as a pyramid. The top level, the top one is I call it stated values. These are the one that is very obvious that your users might tell you what it is in the survey or in a user research. They say what they tell you what they will do, and so on. And then the second layer, I call it experience norms, which is things that they actually do, the behavior. So you can get it from ethnography studies. So these two levels is visible. Everyone is doing, every companies are doing it: market research, user testing, and ethnography, and so on. But what is more important is the other layers that at the bottom layers is invisible layers, where actually is the unconscious values and beliefs that actually drive the subconscious behaviors that they might have. So for example, sometimes you go to a market, you see they do this, they do that, but actually they have no idea why trigger those behavior or mentality or things that they say, no, I don't believe that. But actually when you kind of dig deeper, they actually behave in a certain way as well. So it's kind of like uncovering the underlying subconscious value, and also what triggering that. So very often, like we do things in the UK, for example, it's like we so commonly do that, but there's no idea why we do that or we think that way. But it's so important for us to for businesses to understand what triggering that, to kind of, so that you actually know the root of it, and then you can make decisions and on your product and services to match to that behavior or conscious behavior. So those are the two things that a lot of clients actually come to me for, rather than user research, market research. People tell you what to do, because you need a bit more experience in knowing what to pull out, how to look into, where to find them, how to connect the dots, and so on.
And what about remote versus kind of in-person research? Because obviously since the pandemic, the majority of research, a lot of meetings have been done online. In terms of kind of cross-cultural and international, how important is it to be there in person, would you say?
Yeah, so before pandemic, I almost half of my time is traveling, was traveling, and then half of the time in the UK. But then since pandemic, after the first 2 months, everyone say by June it will be gone, and then everyone say it's not going anywhere. And then we start to move into remote research or remote kind of understanding users from different ways. obviously it still can be done and you can get a lot insight. It would be a bit more complex in setting out and making sure you get as much as possible, and because you need to be more engaged and so on. But I still would say like going to places is more valuable, not just when you are in the sessions, seeing the participants and getting more rapport with them, but also when you're out there, you experience the culture yourself. And also because you're on on the trip to understand users, and so your mindset probably is slightly different from when you're on holiday and you just like relax and so on. So your mind will be actually set up in more observant and what you want to look at, or what are how people in the community behave, or small things when you go for meals, how people do certain things and so on, how people pay. So there's still a lot benefits by going into the market to actually talk to users, especially going to their house. There's a complementary things that you can say, oh, we get them to send photos, or get them to do diaries, to set up videos, but you still will lose that context in terms of the overall context to put the puzzles together when you do that. So yeah, it's still there's an element that, as for example, so with Spotify, we have been doing a lot in different market remotely during the pandemic of 3 years. But we actually managed to travel to Saudi Arabia um, at some point end of last year to kind of understand the market as well. I have to say, if not because we're there, we actually wouldn't get the fuller picture. For many reasons, we experience different things, and we observe so many different behaviors when we're out eating, or when we're traveling, or when we talk to people on the road, when we go for sightseeing and so on. And then we can observe the body language more fully when we talk to them as well.
Interesting. And I mean, your own background, I think, is fascinating. Just to ask you a little bit about that to begin with, just tell us a little bit about your own cultural background,
Origin.
and I suppose how you got into this world.
No, thank you. I often forget about that to kind of to kind of say actually there's a link between what I do and where I'm from and what I do. So I'm Malaysian Chinese, so means that I'm Malaysian, but in Malaysia there are three main ethnicities. So you have Malay, Chinese, and Indians. So I'm Malaysian Chinese. So my grandparents were actually from China. Are actually part of China, which is Taiwan. So I speak Taiwanese with my family. Apart from my brother, for some reason, we speak Mandarin. So in that instance, even though we're Malaysians, but we still follow a lot of Chinese culture. We still celebrate. My family still celebrate Chinese festivals and still follow the customs like Chinese New Year. You give the red pockets and so on. But we are not. We have been our culture also a bit blended into Malaysian's culture. So it's quite a mixture. Like of we are not. We have a lot of different food and different festival holidays to celebrate in Malaysia as well, because all the different ethnicity and so on. So it's kind of like I'm born in a country and grew up in a country where itself is already a micro culture pot. That you actually can experience quite a lot of different things and different culture, different custom, different social behaviors, different family setup and so on. So I think that maybe I'm consciously kind of put it in my mind in terms of why I'm kind of fascinated by these elements and being curious about how I interact with my Chinese friends versus my Indian friends or Malay friends and so on. But I think also part of me that I'm quite a curious person, that's why I moved to the UK, because I want to see the world, and I just like the world in the UK. I had no idea why. I just like, came to the UK, studied and then did my PhD, and then I still don't feel like I know the culture enough to want to live. my dad did say, being an Asian dad, say like 1 year, after 1 year of master, you're coming back. And then I just said, oh, sorry, I got a PhD offer. I'm staying for another 3 years. And then after 3 years, it's just like, I still want to understand. Like I celebrate Christmas. I have a lot of Irish, Northern Irish friends or friends from different countries, but I still don't feel like I know a lot of them. And that's why I wanted to stay. And even though at the time I didn't know all about all these culturalizations, there's a job for you to do to understand different countries and so on. So yeah, it's an interesting route, but I always believe there's something to bring that together because of who I am. And my mom always say, you ask too many questions. So that's why maybe the curiosity comes in as well.
Fascinating. Yeah. So you're a citizen of the world, if we can put it like that. Let's chat a little bit more about the book you've just got coming out. What motivated you to write it, Chui Chui?
So I have been doing this running research, international research. After that, I do more managing and leading and kind of coaching as well. I start to think about, as you grow older, you start to think about, oh, what do I do next? And I do more strategic work now, like advising stakeholder, C-level or more senior management on like how to grow internationally and how to and on those. And just like, if I stop doing this or do it even less and less, where do I put my knowledge that I have curated throughout 15, 16 years? That sometimes I don't even know I have those knowledge, especially it will comes back to me when I start doing it again. Like, for example, if my clients wanted to understand at the moment in Germany that I'm doing a project in Germany, like, oh yeah, how do like all the things will come back to me and say, oh, in Germany you need to look into this and you have to make sure that how to work the translations when the cultural differences, when you communicate with the local teams, how do you do that? So I thought I need to put it somewhere, either for myself or actually for someone else. So I thought books is a better way to kind of put it there and share with other people so that it's useful, because I burned a lot by making a lot of mistakes while managing and setting up international cross-cultural research. So I thought if I can kind of share that with other people, then they don't have to make those mistakes. Then I do, and then we'll get better. So that is how that comes across. But it was a bit of challenge for me when I kind of shape that book, because obviously a lot of what I do is more like importance of culturalizations and how do you kind of look into it and how do you transform that into strategic now. But then part of me also want to put down in terms of the practical side of it, like what are the things you need to look into to manage that process so that you manage that preparations and also executions of international research, so you get as much as you want without have a lot of issues. So I kind of like, oh, where's the balance? It will be a thick book and everything. So I kind of like, kind of find a balance between the two. Maybe in the future, I will write another book more on the strategic side as well.
So, are there any good case studies that you can talk about from the book around? I'm particularly thinking in terms of the challenge of running research overseas or internationally based on your own experiences.
Sure. So one of the challenge, one that I actually remember quite well is I was working with Babylon Health. So it's a digital health tech company, and we got a funding from the Gates Foundation, and we wanted to kind of go into Kenya and run that to see how technology could actually help them in how people with HIV, TB, and also mental health to kind of keep up with their medications, and so they don't stop, because it's important, especially HIV patients, to be okay with that. So we went out, spent 2 weeks in each country, going rural area and so on. Of course, it's kind of complicated in many different ways. So one is like the logistic of it, right? So you need to find people in a rural area, find the right people, and it's still a bit of taboo to kind of reveal you have HIV or mental health, because that's still seen as something that you don't want to people to know. So the recruitment itself is a bit harder. And also you have all these timing issues and kind of logistic as well. But the one thing that I find myself and the client find a bit challenging when we're out there, we were so stressed out because even the local teams often very late come and pick us up. We were rushing and everything, getting ready in the morning every single day, but they're always late. Sometimes could be late for half an hour. That means all the sessions are pushed back. And then once we get to the first house, for example, sometimes you have to walk for a while before you can get to, because the car couldn't get in. And then they were talking and small talking and everything. I was just like, oh, we're already running late for half an hour. Now we are running late an hour to the next one. And then it kind of built up. And we were so stressed out because we don't want we felt rude if we didn't turn up to the third or second, the last participants, or turn up late and then they say, oh, we're not available anymore. And then we gone and just like, oh, we're only here for 2 weeks. But then after that, we realized this is how the culture of how they view time in the first place. There's how they view urgency is slightly different from what we all know, and also we need to cater and understand we go to these people's house, very private houses. We're talking about very, very sensitive topics, and we need to build. It's very common for them to build that relationship, and they have small talks. Small talks could be like very personal, like, oh, we are family, and they normally have a family member or social workers come with us, so that is actually quite connection. So you have more people to kind of bring together first before you kind of sit down and have that conversations. And so yeah, that takes time. So, and it's okay for none of the participants that were running so late were having issues, that they were fine, like they were just like, yeah, it's fine. So it's kind of like understanding that beforehand, so things are not tense with everyone. Yeah, so there are a lot of different things that you can, this is kind of like examples of finding people. And then I have another examples of, for example, years ago when I was doing research with Ritz-Carlton for Qatar, and we wanted to talk to very, very, very rich, high net worth people about booking hotels and luxury hotels and so on. And none of them turned out, even though we offered to pay £750 per hour.
Wow.
Even that is like 13 years ago, like a long time ago, even for that. But you always call them, just like, are you coming? Just a few hours before, just like, inshallah, just like, let's God decide. I'm just like, that means it's a no. So, and then we kind of have to look into what we should do. So we actually offer to pick them up by the hotel drivers, and they say, yeah, actually it doesn't work because they have the money, they have the driver, so that doesn't incentivize. So we then understand the culture is about relationship, about status, about privilege. It's important because everyone is rich. So how do I show myself a bit more? So we get the managing director of the hotel, for Ritz-Carlton in Doha, to kind of call them and say, like, that is a relationship, right? There's someone high up talk to you now, and also to offer them after the research to show them around the palace, because that hotel is actually built in a old palace. So there are a lot of places you actually don't get into and so on. So we are going to give you so that brings them in. So sometimes so in all these instances, you need to understand the culture to kind of just adjust the way that you do that. These are just a few examples. You know, we're talking about recruitment incentives, and we're talking about timing, but there's so many different elements that needs to think about. That's why I wrote that book as well, to kind of give all these examples and then say, think about this when you like, be more mindful, really, not just taking granted of this is how you just recruit, it just incentivize, you just managing the time, say we are going to come to here and here. You know, there are a lot of things would play into that role.
Fascinating. Yeah, and I can well imagine that. And it's funny. I'm just reflecting on an experience I had when I was doing some overseas research a number of years ago. She was in Indonesia, and we were talking to various government bodies. But each meeting we had to allow 2 or 3 hours, and there was a lot of food. Food was this really important thing.
Oh yeah,
we
love Asia.
In Asia, absolutely, it was fantastic. And then halfway through the meeting, all this other food was brought in, and we had to sort of have a pause and sit and eat it all and share it. And then there was coffee brought in, and it was fantastic. But it was very, very different to the way you'd run a meeting, I think, in Britain. Probably much better for it because we enjoyed it and it was very social. But it just was a very, very different way to begin with. I mean, after a few days, we got used to it. But to begin with, it was like, whoa.
Did you not bring that back to your meeting in the UK?
We should do.
Let's do that.
You walk into a meeting room, there's always little boxes on the table full of delicious things that you've never seen before. But fantastic.
Yeah.
What would you say, Chui Chui, kind of a few final questions, is it would be your biggest takeaway to somebody starting to do work in a kind of international cross-cultural sphere, whether it be research, design, kind of strategy? What do they need to think about?
I think first of all is not to assume that you know it all or it's easy or straightforward or just follow the big stereotype of what people have in that culture already. So first of all is to be open-minded and challenge yourself to be saying I will learn a lot of new things from that. And then be curious as well about every single thing that you hear, because sometimes it might seem very, very mundane and normal and standard, but actually if you piece them together, it could be something very interesting as well. And also don't be too excited about one thing you find out and then just grab that and just use that continuous for everything, because there are a lot of times like some of the things that you found might be just a puzzle that show you one thing. So imagine, I always like to use the puzzles as a metaphor, like the whole culture is the whole puzzle, but the problem is you don't have the final photo or image for you to say, this is how you put that together. So you need to start putting it to see what you reveal. So if you kind of say, I actually found out one or two insights, and then, that's great, and then you keep talking about the same thing, you only talk about the 2 or 3 puzzles, and it might actually, it looks like a mouse, but actually it's the tail of the horse. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of very different way. So keep digging and keep challenging what you found, and be don't think that how you think about is always right, what you familiar is always right, especially when you work with local teams or local vendors. Like you don't assume that they will know what you want. They will do the research in the way that you normally do research, because trust me, every countries have a different way of doing things. Even set up a Zoom call for live viewing, there are several ways that you can do it. Everyone's have a different ways, and some is better, some is easier, some is not. So yeah, even that small things, understand, communicate with them first, and don't take it for granted. Like this is how everyone is doing in the Western world. It must be the way you do it as well.
Brilliant. That's a lovely way to end. So I'll put a link to the book in the show notes. And where can people get hold of it?
So they are all in Amazon. So you can find it for Amazon from your own countries.com.uk or so on. So there are Kindle versions and also the paper book as well. If you can't find them, just message me on LinkedIn. I'm more active in LinkedIn than any other social media.
Right. Okay. I was going to say, where can people find you? So LinkedIn is the place to do that.
I have a website, so bayo.global, but there are some case studies of all the work. So every end of the year actually summarize what I did, all the projects and works that I did the year before. So there are a few years in there. So yeah, if someone is interested, bayo.global.
Brilliant. And very final question then, Chui Chui. What's the most rewarding part of doing design and research kind of internationally and cross-culturally, would you say, in your experience?
Personally, it's just fascinating, right? I constantly and constantly learning new things, even my own culture sometimes, or in Malaysia, or even I went to Japan a few times for different companies and everything. Every single time you kind of look into different things, so it's very, very rewarding in that sense that you learn a lot of new things. I think professionally as well is to see how to actually first of all open up people's mind about their world out there, that you should be open up, so that hopefully that will not only influence them in their professional life or their business, but also their personal life as well, to be more inclusive about other people and so on. But also to help businesses to kind of be better and more relevant, and see them actually they show their care and respect to a different culture, so that they can, I know ultimately business is still about money and being successful and have sales and so on, but also it's good to see brands care about different markets and the people, and get to understand that. And the more everyone is doing this, the more we are more acceptance about everyone as well, hopefully, in the world, make the world a bit better.
That's a lovely way to end. It's been great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time, Chui Chui.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Understanding Users. If you enjoyed what you heard, do please like or comment wherever you're listening, and feel free to share this episode more widely. And feel free, of course, to drop me a line with any feedback via LinkedIn or my website, researchable.uk. Join me again next time when I'll be sharing some more insights from digital design professionals. Until then, stay safe and stay user-centered.